Mortal Kombat!
Oh, excuse me. I guess I should be making a video, shouldn't I? Fighting games are truly an unusual breed of video game. They're credited by developers being some of the most difficult to make, they're credited by players as being some of the hardest to learn, and they're even known to esports enthusiasts as being some of the most intense to watch when played at a very high level. One can naturally infer that because of the extremely technical parts of a fighting game, one can naturally incur a lot of stress and pressure while playing. And usually how a person performs is usually indicative on how that said person handles stress in a match. So I think fighting games are an interesting place to study stress management. So what we could learn is why we should extensively prepare, how we should handle high pressure situations, and how you should handle loss, especially in regards to your own mental state. As Benjamin Franklin once said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. No statement is more applicable to life than that. Well, other than maybe the time that Butters from South Park, talked about sadness. But, this video is about stress management, not sadness, so let's move on. When I was coming up with the idea for this video, I initially thought of Payday 2, and I thought about, averting negative emotion is very important for implementing every single step of a heist. But I decided to talk about fighting games instead because I wanted to focus on the pressure of oneself rather than the pressure on a team. Regardless, the point I make with Payday 2 still applies here. If you don't know your chosen character very, very well and you haven't extensively prepared for it, you're more likely to lose a fight because of all the additional stresses you're going to be stacking on yourself. It's a little bit like driving a car. So for example, when I took driver's ed back in high school, they taught us that teens who have less than 6 months of driving experience tend to actually make up for more accidents than the elderly who happen to have a lesser sensory capacity. And why would that be exactly? Well, the fact that they haven't properly developed their instincts or their muscle memory would kind of mean that they would have to exert more mental energy on the tasks of driving a car, which in turn would exert more pressure and stress on themselves as a result. I hope you see where I'm going with this. If you haven't practiced combos, done tutorials, or at least, thrown yourselves at matches that really don't matter, when the matches do matter, the pressure you will feel will simply be overwhelming. The same thing happens when you are doing things such as taking a test, going to a job interview, driving a car, going on a date with a sassy senorita, or any other things of that nature. By preparing, you can combat the pressure that you might feel. But as important as preparation is, it is also important to actually know how to handle a high pressure situation when you're actually in it. I've talked about dating a decent amount on this channel, and when I have, I usually inform you that you should try to remain calm and also hone your instincts on how to behave accordingly. This same rule in dating applies to other high pressure situations as well. In a fighting game, especially in a high pressure match, maintaining poise and not allowing your opponent to get in your head is key. You see, this is why psychological warfare in the terms of trash talking and taunting are so common in these circles. Even though this objectively does nothing, subjectively, to an untrained mind, it will stir up emotions which can drastically influence decision making. Cutting off negative emotions to your mind is absolutely key to being able to make optimal decisions. For example, if you're playing chess and you're ducking pissed, you will be more likely to play aggressively rather than do an optimal strategy, which would involve preserving yourself more because you're just so focused on inflicting pain on your opponent. Likewise, fighting games are like a very, very fast game of chess. If you're not making optimal decisions because your ego is getting in the way, well, your chances for winning just plummet. In real life, let's consider a domestic conflict. If you crumble under emotion and start using ad hominems or other logical fallacies, well, they're going to be used against you and your reputation is going to go down severely. Let's say you do mess up, because none of us are perfect. What do you do then? Now, let's say you go in for a job interview and they say, "Oh, we'll call you," but you don't hear back in like 2 weeks. Well, what do? In every recent video essay I've made on this channel, I've covered loss in some capacity, but that is primarily because it is an extremely important topic to talk about? Well, it might seem like you have three options: blame the interviewer, blame yourself, or simply move on and ignore it. By themselves, all three of these options are actually extremely flawed. For example, in a fighting game, if you lose and blame your opponent and simply say, hey, he's just an a-hole cheater, well, regardless of how true that actually is, it does take away an internal locus of control, which, again, prevents improvement, like I've talked about in my other videos. Now, if you take the other option, which is simply blaming yourself and saying, hey, I just really suck, well, then it will tear down your self-confidence and self-esteem, which is not good because it places a mental roadblock in front of yourself. And lastly, simply ignoring it and trying to quote-unquote move on is very, very common advice, but still remains flawed. You see, while that might be healthy for your mental and emotional health, it is not healthy overall because it simply ignores the objective flaws that you might have. So how about we mix them together? Why don't we treat this as ingredients for success rather than separate little snacks for failure? If I'm playing Mortal Kombat and I'm trying to figure out why my opponent beat me, I could say things like, hey, was I fighting his main? Does he simply have more time in the game than me? Does he have a combo that he really knows how to execute? Is it because he's more experienced? Questions like that. Then you could factor in, hey, how do I counter this experience myself? What am I missing here? What is the missing puzzle piece? Do I need to find a better character for myself? Are my reflexes bad? Do I need to change my playstyle? Questions like that. And finally, the last component. Instead of simply ignoring it and trying to move on, what you really do is you emotionally detach yourself. You don't forget it, but you do take what you've learned and you do internalize it, again, while emotionally detaching yourself. By understanding the factors that contributed to your failure, you can take even massive failures or massive defeats with stride, and you can optimize your performance so long as you emotionally detach yourself. I think this is fairly clear how we can apply this in real life. Why did you not impress your client? Perhaps he has a personal bias against you, or maybe the product you produced wasn't quite what he envisioned. Why didn't you produce the product that he wanted? Perhaps it's because you didn't ask enough questions, or you got partially lazy through the design. And finally, should this end your career? Absolutely not. You should, in turn, analyze both the internal and external factors that contributed to your failure and try to learn from them. And in turn, by doing this will actually optimize you to earn those victories you've been seeking for all along. Not only are fighting games difficult to make, but they are also extremely technical and yet have pioneered some of the greatest moments in esports history. So naturally, the pressure people can have while playing fighting games competitively can almost seem insurmountable. But how someone handles the bombardment of emotions and stress can drastically influence their performance in a match. So in turn, there's a lot we can learn from fighting games about handling stressful situations. For example, why you should extensively prepare, how you should deal with high-pressure situations, and ultimately, how you should deal with loss. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, you know me, I'm Gentleman Jex, and we just wrapped up another neat little video with a nice little bow, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out my other videos. Thanks so much for the 600 subs, and do that. Maybe go on my subreddit, post a couple cool memes, and I love ya. Bye! Mortal Kombat!